My father took the microphone at my sister's engagement party and called me the family's disappointment in front of 63 people. He didn't use that exact word. He was too smooth for that. He'd given speeches his whole career, 31 years as a high school principal, a decade on the city council. He knew how to land a line. God gave us 2 daughters, he said, champagne flute in hand, my sister beaming beside him in a blush pink dress. One of them is standing in this room tonight, about to marry a wonderful man, Vanderbilt degree. Vice president at 27. She turned out exactly the way we prayed. He paused, looked directly at me. The other one, we're still hoping she finds her direction. The room laughed. 63 people, my mother's book club, my father's former colleagues, our aunt and uncle from Chattanooga, every neighbor who had watched us grow up. They laughed and clinked glasses and looked at me with that particular expression. Pity wrapped inside amusement, and my sister laughed into her champagne, and her fiancé laughed too, and my father tapped the microphone twice, proud of himself, like he'd just delivered the punchline of the year. I was 25. Standing in the corner of my parents' backyard in a dress I'd bought on clearance for $31. No one had asked me to give a toast. No one had asked me to say anything at all. I set my glass down on the nearest table. I walked through the gate. I got in my car, and I drove the 40 minutes back to my apartment in Knoxville and sat in my kitchen and didn't cry, which somehow felt worse than crying. That was 4 years ago. My name is Jocelyn Marsh, and I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how I went back. You can't understand why I went back without understanding what I was returning to. My parents both grew up in small towns outside Knoxville. My father was the first in his family to get a college degree, and he never let anyone in his orbit forget it. Achievement was the currency of our household, not warmth, not safety, not the ordinary comfort of being known. Achievement, grades, titles, things you could post on the refrigerator and brag about after church. My sister was born in 1992. I was born in 1996, 4 years apart. A lifetime of different expectations. She was the one they could brag about. Straight A's from 5th grade forward. Valedictorian of her high school class. Accepted to Vanderbilt on a partial scholarship. Dean's List every semester. Graduated with honors. A job offer at a consulting firm before she even walked across the stage. I was the other story. B student. Interests that didn't translate to trophies. Photography, hiking, journals no one read. I got into UT Knoxville, but deferred a year to work and save money. And in that year, I realized I didn't want to go the way everyone else expected me to. I enrolled in community college instead. 2 years, then a transfer to a smaller state school. Graduated at 23 with $19,000 in loans and a communications degree and a job at a local marketing firm for $36,000 a year. My father called it taking the scenic route. Sunday dinners were their own kind of evidence. My sister's accomplishments played on a loop. Her promotion, her new apartment, the conference where she'd been a speaker. My father would lean back in his chair and say, "That's my girl, that's what hard work looks like." Then he'd glance at me. "How's work, Jocelyn?" And before I could answer, "Still at that marketing company." Still. Like it was a waiting room, like my entire life was a placeholder. Between freshman year of high school and the day I walked out of that backyard, I heard some version of, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" so many times that I stopped counting. I learned to make myself smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. But the party was different. The party was 63 people, and a microphone and my father's voice, carrying across the yard. I didn't leave without trying. I went back inside after sitting in my car for 20 minutes. I found my father refilling his drink in the kitchen. "What you said in the toast," I started. "That wasn't okay." He looked at me with the expression he always wore when I was being inconvenient. patient, mildly irritated, certain he was right. It was a joke, Jocelyn. Everyone laughed. I noticed. You're too sensitive, always have been. My mother appeared in the doorway. She put her hand on my arm and said, "This is your sister's night. Please don't make a scene." I wasn't making a scene. I was standing in a kitchen talking quietly to two people who had just told 63 friends that I was the one who hadn't turned out right. But I was the problem. I found my sister in the backyard. She stepped away from her fiancé and came to me. "You okay?" she said. "Did you hear what he said?" She sighed. "Jose, you know how Dad is." "I know exactly how he is. He didn't mean anything by it. He's proud of me and he expresses it badly. He told 60 people I don't have direction. In front of your colleagues. In front of people who have known me since I was 6. She reached for my hand. "Can we talk about this later? Tonight is just." "Tonight is always someone else's night," I said. "And there's always a reason to wait." She didn't say anything. Her fiancé came over and put his arm around her, and she turned back to him, and that was it. I drove home. I blocked my father's number, then my mother's, then my sister's. That last one I held my thumb over for a full minute before I pressed it. I changed my privacy settings. I left the family group text. I checked my phone every half hour until 2 in the morning, waiting for someone to say they were sorry, or that they'd gone too far or anything at all. 0 messages, 0 calls, 0 acknowledgement that anything had happened. That night, I made a promise to myself that felt different from every other time I'd made a promise like it. I was done waiting to matter to people who had already decided I didn't. The next 4 years are easier to summarize than they were to live through. I moved into a smaller apartment to put more money toward my loans. $875 a month, 1 bedroom, a view of the parking structure next door. I worked. I got a raise at 26, another at 27. By 28, I was a marketing manager making $54,000 a year. I rebuilt my savings from near zero to $8,400. I paid my loans down to $11,000. I started therapy 8 months after the party. Dr. Chen, every other Tuesday at 4:30, $60 a session with my insurance. First session, she asked me what I wanted to feel. I said I wanted to stop feeling like I owed my family an explanation for existing the way I exist. She said that was a good place to start. I made 2 real friends at work. Bria, who texted me memes at midnight and showed up with food when I was sick without being asked, and a colleague named Tom who had his own complicated family and never pushed me to explain mine. I joined a hiking group. I found a small church that had nothing to do with anyone who knew my parents. There were hard stretches. Thanksgiving alone 3 years in a row. Christmas at Bria's family's house 1 year, sitting at her kitchen table, watching her parents bicker over who burned the rolls, feeling a grief I couldn't name. Not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd never had. But mostly, I was okay, building something entirely mine. It felt good the way quiet feels good after a long time in a loud room. Then my phone buzzed on a Thursday night in March. Local area code, not saved. I almost ignored it. I almost let it go to voicemail. I picked up. "Jocelyn," my father's voice, older, quieter than I remembered it. "It's Dad." 8 seconds of silence. I could hear my own heartbeat. "How did you get this number?" "Your cousin gave it to me. I wouldn't have called if it wasn't." He stopped. "It's your sister. She needs help. She's here at the house and she won't talk to us. Please just call your mother, please." He gave me a number, different from the one I'd blocked, and hung up. I stood in my kitchen for 11 minutes. My pasta boiled over and I didn't notice. My mother answered on the first ring. She sounded like she hadn't slept in days. She told me everything in a low, careful voice, like she was trying to get the sequence right. My sister had married her fiancé 9 months after the engagement party. Within the first year, he took over their finances completely. Joint accounts only he could access, her paycheck deposited, and immediately moved somewhere she couldn't touch. An allowance, my mother used that word, allowance, for groceries and gas, receipts expected. He monitored her phone, he controlled which friends she could see and when. He told her that her family was too involved, that her sister, me, was jealous and unsupportive, and that she needed to start choosing her priorities. She believed him, because when you're isolated, the only voice you hear is the one beside you. 3 months ago, she told him she wanted a divorce. Before she could retain an attorney, he moved $60,000 from their joint savings to an account in his mother's name. She left with $340 in a personal checking account she'd quietly opened without telling him. 3 suitcases and her car. She'd been in her childhood bedroom for 11 days. She won't eat, my mother said. She won't come out. She keeps asking why no one warned her. The air left my chest. Why didn't she call me? I asked. When things were getting bad, why didn't she reach out? A pause, longer than it should have been. Your father and I, my mother's voice shifted in a way I felt in my stomach. When you cut off contact, we explained it to her. We told her that you had expressed concerns about the marriage privately, that you'd said things to us, that you'd made your feelings clear and you didn't want to be involved. Very still, I never said that. We were trying to explain why you weren't in contact. We didn't want her to think she had done something wrong. So you told her I'd said things I never said. Silence. You told her I didn't support her marriage and that's why I disappeared. So when her husband told her I was toxic and jealous, it wasn't new information. You'd already built that case. I kept my voice level. She was being isolated and controlled, and the one person who might have recognized what was happening, the sister she already believed had turned her back on her, couldn't reach her because you'd made sure she wouldn't try. My mother was crying. She said it wasn't their intention. She said they'd only been trying to protect my sister's feelings. She said she was sorry. She hadn't apologized in 4 years for what my father said into a microphone. She was apologizing now for this because she needed something from me. I'll come Saturday, I said, but I have conditions. I wrote them down that night. 6 rules. 1. I will not stay overnight. 2. I will not pretend through a family meal. 3. I will not apologize for the 4 years I was gone. 4. If I feel like I'm being managed, I will leave. 5. If I go upstairs to talk to her, I will tell her the truth. All of it. 6. Whatever she decides after she knows the truth, I will support it. I called Bria. She said, "Be careful. Remember why you left." I said, "I remember." Saturday afternoon, I got in my car, 40 minutes to my parents' house. I didn't play music. The quiet felt right. The house looked the same. White siding, black shutters, the dogwood my mother planted in 2003. My father was on the porch before I got out of the car. He looked older, more tired. He extended his hand and I shook it. Inside, my mother made a movement toward a hug, and I stepped sideways. She let her arms drop. I sat on the couch, kept my jacket on. "Tell me everything," I said, not the version from the phone. Everything. It took 40 minutes. My father did most of the talking. The financial control had started early. 6 months into the marriage. The isolation 9 months in. They hadn't actually seen my sister for nearly a year before she left, because her husband had told her that her parents were creating tension in the marriage. "You didn't know how bad it was?" I asked. My father looked at the floor. "We suspected. We didn't ask the right questions." "Did you ever tell her what he was doing had a name?" Silence. "Did you ever say the word abuse?" His jaw tightened. "We didn't want to push her further away." "You pushed me away, and I wasn't even in a dangerous situation." I was just inconvenient. The room was quiet except for the air conditioning. I looked at the mantel, 14 photos, my sister at every age, every milestone, not a single frame with my face in it, 4 years gone and they hadn't moved a thing. I'm going upstairs, I said. The door at the end of the hall was closed. I could hear something from inside. Television or music, barely audible. I knocked 3 times. Nothing. It's Jocelyn. A pause. It's your sister. A sound from inside. Movement. Then, flat and exhausted, what are you doing here? Mom called me. Can I come in? I'll explain everything. A long silence, maybe 30 seconds, then the click of a lock turning. She looked smaller than I remembered. She'd always been the one who seemed to fill a room. The confidence, the tailored clothes, the way she entered a space like she'd been expected. She didn't look like that now. Oversized sweatshirt, leggings, hair pulled back, face bare. She'd lost weight. Her eyes had a quality I recognized from my own mirror in the years after the party. Not exactly sadness, more like someone had turned a dimmer switch very far down. She sat on the edge of the bed. I sat on the floor, the same way I used to sit when we were kids, and she was reading, and I wanted to be near her, but didn't know how to ask. They told me you said you didn't support the marriage, she said, that you'd told them things about him, about me. I never said anything like that. They were specific. I know. It wasn't true. I didn't soften it. I went no contact because of what Dad said at your engagement party, in his toast. He told 60 people I hadn't found my direction. He laughed. When I tried to talk to him afterward, he told me I was too sensitive. Mom told me not to make a scene. You said you'd deal with it later. I paused. Later never came, so I left. She was quiet for a long moment. I thought you were upset because you didn't get to give a speech. I was upset because your father stood in front of everyone who knows us and announced that you turned out right and I turned out as an open question. 4 years ago, in front of people who have known me since I was 6, and not one of them apologized, so I left. And they told me you said you didn't support. She stopped. Her face shifted slowly, the way understanding settles in when it's something you don't want to understand. Oh. She pulled her knees to her chest. He said things about you, she said quietly. My husband, that you were jealous, that you'd always been the difficult one in the family, and that the reason you weren't in contact was because you'd burned it yourself. She exhaled. And Mom and Dad had already told me you didn't support the marriage. So when he said those things, there was already evidence for him to point to. They built the case, I said, and he used it. We sat with that. I wanted to reach out to you, she said, when things started getting bad. There was a night, maybe 2 years ago. He'd been drinking, and he said some and I went into the bathroom and sat on the floor, and I thought about calling you. But I thought you hated me. My chest tightened. I didn't hate you. I know that now. I was hurt, I said, by a lot of things over a lot of years, but I never hated you. She cried then, quietly at first, then harder, her shoulders shaking. I stayed on the floor and didn't move. Sometimes the most useful thing you can do for someone is just not leave. We went downstairs together. 40 minutes later, my parents looked up from the living room with the expression of people who have been waiting and don't know what they're about to receive. My sister stood beside me. She said, "You told me Jocelyn didn't support the marriage." My mother looked at me, then at her. We were just trying to. You told me specific things, that she'd said things to you privately, that she'd made her feelings clear. My father started. We were trying to explain why she wasn't in contact. By making things up, I said. By telling her I'd said things I never said, so she'd have an explanation for my absence that didn't include the fact that your retirement speech called me a disappointment in front of her entire guest list. My mother began to cry. He used it, my sister said. Her voice was steadier than I expected. Every time I thought about reaching out to her, I'd remember what you told me. And then he would say the same things, and I had no reason to question it because you'd already confirmed it first. She looked at them for a long moment. I was isolated, and you gave him a tool. My father opened his mouth. She kept going. I know you didn't intend for any of this. But it happened because you cared more about explaining your own choices than about making sure I had someone to call. The room was silent. I looked at my parents, older now, the house unchanged around them, 14 photos with no room for my face, and I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not the satisfaction I might have imagined. Just a level, clear understanding of exactly who they were and exactly what I was willing to give them, which was nothing more than the basics. Nothing more. Here's what happens now, I said. I'm going to help my sister with the legal and financial next steps. She makes every decision about her own life, and you don't interfere with that. If she asks for your opinion, give it. If she doesn't, hold it. If she needs space from you while she figures things out, you give her that too. My father started to speak. I kept going. You're not going to spin this for the neighbors or the people at church. If anyone asks, you tell them she left a marriage that wasn't healthy and she's rebuilding her life. That is the truth, and it's enough. My mother asked quietly, and us, what about you and us? You and I are what we've been for 4 years, strangers who share biology. Maybe that changes someday. That's not a promise I can make you tonight. My father nodded. Once, it wasn't agreement exactly. It was closer to a man accepting a consequence he'd known was coming. The 6 weeks that followed were the most genuinely useful I had ever felt in relation to my family. I called in a favor through Bria's network and got my sister connected with a paralegal who specialized in financial asset recovery. During divorce proceedings, I spent a Saturday afternoon helping her open 3 new accounts, checking savings and 1 earmarked for legal fees, all in her name only. I found a nonprofit that worked specifically with survivors of economic abuse and drove her to her first intake appointment. I sat in the waiting room for an hour and 15 minutes and didn't mind. She got a job offer 8 weeks after she left, entry level, less than a third of what she'd made before. She took it. It's a starting point, she said. It's yours, I said. That's the whole point. She was still living at my parents' house, which was complicated in ways I tried not to involve myself in. But she called me almost every other day, sometimes about paperwork, sometimes about nothing in particular. A podcast, a question about whether she should get a plant or a cat. She got a cat, a gray one she named Gerald, which is an excellent name for a cat. We were careful with each other, deliberate. We were constructing something that had never really existed before, which meant we were inventing it as we went. And it felt fragile, the way new things do before they've had time to hold. I didn't go back to my parents' house after that Saturday. My mother texted occasionally, short messages, carefully worded, nothing that required a real response. I replied sometimes. Not always. I wasn't ready for more, and I'd stopped pretending I owed anyone my readiness on a schedule that worked for them. My father called once. I let it go to voicemail. He said he'd been thinking about a lot of things, and he hoped I'd be willing to talk someday. I haven't called back. Maybe I will. I don't know yet, and I've stopped needing to know the answer to that question right now, which is its own kind of progress. 2 months ago, my sister and I sat in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning. First time we'd been out in public together in years. She was talking about what her therapist had said about patterns, about the way the marriage had mapped onto things she'd already learned to expect. And she said, I keep thinking about how I had everything they wanted for me, and it nearly destroyed me. And you had nothing they wanted for you, and you built a real life. And I think that might be the most important information. I've ever been given. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, I think we both got handed things we didn't ask for and had to figure out what to do with them. She nodded, stirred her coffee. I'm glad you came back, she said. I'm glad you were still there, I said. That's the part they don't account for, the people who say, cut them off and never look back. Sometimes the people inside that house aren't only the ones who hurt you. Sometimes they're people who got caught in the same machinery you did, ground up differently, who are still, against all probability, reaching toward something real. My sister is reaching. I'm reaching back. My parents did what they did. They made choices that cascaded in ways they didn't predict, and they may be genuinely sorry. I think my father is the real kind, not the defensive kind. I saw it in his face when my sister came downstairs and said out loud what it had cost her. But sorry doesn't undo the architecture of what was built. You can be sorry and still have spent years constructing walls that took your daughters a long time to find each other around. I'm 29 years old. I have a job I'm good at, an apartment I made into something I'm proud of, friends who show up, and a sister I'm learning to know for the first time. At her engagement party, my father said into a microphone that he was still hoping I'd find my direction. I found it, quietly, on my own, in every way he never imagined and never once gave me credit for. It just didn't lead back to him, and I'm finally, genuinely, okay with that.